Who are my auto-buy fantasy authors? Which books do I always recommend? How did I start reading fantasy? Let's talk about it. Okay, let's try to do this again because I literally just recorded this video, but apparently I forgot to hit record.
Unlucky.
But firstly, I want to say thank you. These past 3 or 4 months have honestly been crazy. I launched my YouTube channel and I now have more than 100,000 views across all my videos. I now have a Patreon and I already have some Patreons. The support for the channel and what I do here is honestly blowing me away and I'm truly lost for words, so thank you guys. But this influx of new subscribers has also made me realize that most of you don't really know me, so I thought I would do the get to know the fancy reader tag so you can learn more about me and my taste in fantasy. So let's talk about fantasy. What is your fantasy origin story, or how you came to read your first fantasy novel? As almost everyone in my generation, my gateway drug to fantasy was Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. I read these books in my early teens and those were probably the first books that made me fall in love with fantasy. These books felt so magical at the time and I loved the world and I loved the characters that Rowling had crafted. Also, the movies are surprisingly good. While I did have a break from fantasy in my later teens, experience Harry Potter definitely made a big impact on me, which I'm so grateful for. If you could be the hero or heroine in a fantasy novel, who would be the author and what's one trope you insist in the story? I at least know who I wouldn't want to write me as a hero in a fantasy novel. I wouldn't want Robin Hobb to make me into a character because I don't want to experience non-stop emotional terror. I wouldn't choose Joe Abercrombie because that would just be miserable. I will probably choose Stephen King because King is probably one of the best authors when it comes to coming of age stories, and I would like my character to grow and mature throughout the story. When it comes to tropes, I would probably choose the underdog trope. I love underdogs in my story and it would be great to see how King would help me overcome different barriers and grow as part of facing all of these challenges and hardships. What is a fantasy you read this year that you want more people to read? Okay, I read some really great books this year and I'll mention 3 books. Firstly, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Wow, what can I say? If you want to read an atmospheric story with a lot of intrigue and fantastic themes, then pick up this book. It's a weird book, but it is really, really good. It's been more than 3 months since I finished it, and I still think about it on a frequent basis. Secondly, a self-published novella which is The Citron Key by L.L. McRae. This novella is free on the author's website, and I loved this one. McRae was able to do a lot of great world building and craft a compelling story and characters in only about 100 pages. I loved this novella and I really wanted more from this world, which made me pick up The Iron Crown, which is the first book in the series. Seriously, please just give this one a try. It's free on the author's website. Thirdly, Legends and Latte by Travis Baldry. I picked up this book after Patrick Leo recommended it and I'm so glad I did. This is not your typical fantasy because the stakes are very low in this one. It is basically about this character that moves to a new town and sets up a coffee shop, and this was such a cozy read. I love the feelings that this cute story invoked in me and the way that food is described. If you're looking for something that will make you feel good, then pick up Legends and Latte. I really want to read more cozy fantasy books now. What is your favorite fantasy subgenre? What subgenre have you not read much from? Well, this one is pretty obvious, which is epic fantasy. I love a good epic fantasy and it's definitely one of my favorite subgenres because that basically captures everything. If you want some more specific ones, then coming of age fantasies, political fantasies, dragon fantasies and dying earth fantasies are some of my favorites. A subgenre I haven't read much from is romantic fantasies or erotic fantasies, and I'm currently not planning to. I'm not a huge fan of romance and steamy, smutty stories, but maybe I should give this subgenre a try. Let me know if you have any recommendations for any erotic fantasies that you think I would enjoy. Who is one of your auto-buy fantasy authors? I would definitely say that John Gwynne and Joe Abercrombie are some authors I always buy books from, and they never really disappoint. The Faithful and the Fallen and the First Love books are fantastic. Surprisingly, Brandon Sanderson isn't an auto-buy author for me because I'm mostly interested in his Cosmere books, and I haven't read any of his non-Cosmere books. Oh, and how could I forget Fonda Lee? The Greenbone Saga is ridiculously good, and I will definitely read everything that she writes from now on. There are also some indie authors such as Daniel T. Jackson and Ryan Cahill who have become some of my favorite authors, and I will definitely buy more books from them in the future. Both of these authors have books coming out later this year, which I will definitely be reading. How do you typically find fancy recommendations? I get most of my recommendations from BookTube and Bookstagram. Probably the book reviewers I have the most similar rating taste to are Daniel Green, Patrick Leo, Captured in Words, and Philip Chase. There are so many more fantastic book reviewers out there, but those are just some of my favorites. What is an upcoming fantasy release you are excited for? Well, without a doubt, The Jade Setter of Jan Loon. Fonda Lee has my heart, and I can't wait to read this novella, which is set in the Greenbone saga world. I am expecting it to blow me away. I'm also really excited about The Exile by Ryan Cahill, and the sequel in the Illborn saga, and Babel by R.F. Kuang, just to mention a few. It looks like 2022 will be a really great year for fantasy books. What is one misconception about fantasy you would like to lay to rest? Well, the fantasy is all about wizards saying Wingardium Leviosa, and the fantasy doesn't have much literary value. I recently made a video discussing what I have discovered reading 156 fantasy books, but mainly I've discovered that fantasy is a genre that doesn't only serve the purpose of escapism. It is a beautiful genre that analyzes themes and deeper truths in ways that no other genre can. I would also love more people, maybe especially in the academic sphere, to realize that fantasy is a genre that has much literary value and deserves to be talked about more. Yes, there are many bad fantasy books, but all genres have bad books. If someone had never read a fantasy book before and asked to recommend the first 3 books that come to mind as places to start, what would those recommendations be? I always recommend the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I think this series is a perfect gateway into adult fantasy and can be enjoyed by young adults and adults. It is also a fantastic introduction to seeing how a hard magic system works, and will give most readers a general feeling about what modern fantasy reads like. Another one is His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. It's been a while since I read this series, and it is YA, but I remember how magical it felt reading this one. There are animal companions and fantastic world building, and it's definitely a modern classic that more people should read. Then I will probably also recommend The Hobbit by Tolkien. The writing style is definitely different from what modern fantasy books have, but this is a great starting place for readers who want to get into fantasy. The story isn't too complex, which is why I think it's a great place to start. Who is the most recent fantasy reading content creator you came across that you'd like to give a shout out to? Here I would like to give a shout out to 2 content creators. Firstly, Jordan La Magna Meneghetti, not sure if I pronounced that correctly, and Read by Kyle. These 2 are new to the BookTube community and love fantasy, and definitely deserve more subscribers. Make sure to subscribe to their channels. I know they would really appreciate that. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to my Patreons. I really, really appreciate it. See you in the next video.